All right, welcome again to Israel Teach News. And this is the Israel Teach News report for April 8th, 2020. We deal with the news of the day from a biblical perspective. And for those who are celebrating the feast days of the Most High, hope you are celebrating them even in these particular times. Okay, so let's get started. This is from BBC News. Coronavirus, 4 out of 5 people's jobs hit by pandemic. A total of 81% of the global workforce of 3.3 billion people have had their workplace fully or partially. Someone who has been impacted by this virus in one way or another in regard to unemployment or even been infected with it. The International Labor Organization, an agency of the United Nations, has been looking at the global impact with a series of charts. Their work shows the global scale of the impact of the coronavirus outbreak. Workers and businesses are facing catastrophe in both developed and developing economies, said ILO Director General Guy Ryder. We have to move fast, decisively, and together. The right urgent measures could make the difference between survival and collapse. All right, this is from Senior Writer for National Security. This is Paul Shinkman's report. 1,500 troops have tested positive for COVID-19 as military struggles with virus spread. More than 1,500 active duty troops have been diagnosed with coronavirus, according to new statistics released by the Pentagon. And in the broader Department of Defense, including civilians, contractors, and dependents, that number has reached to 2,657, including 7 deaths. The Navy continues to have the highest number of coronavirus cases as officials grapple with how to treat the crew of the USS Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier. Okay, so that's usnews.com. All right. Acting U.S. Navy Secretary resigns after ridiculing commander of coronavirus hit ship. Acting Navy Secretary Thomas Modly resigned on Tuesday after he faced mounting backlash for firing and ridiculing the commander of a U.S. aircraft carrier who pleaded for help stemming a coronavirus out on board. All right. This is from CNN, Eric Bradner, April 7th, 2020. This is the headline. This is ridiculous. Wisconsin holds its primary election in the middle of a pandemic. Wrap your head around this. Long lines of voters, many of them wearing face masks, stretched for blocks through Milwaukee early Tuesday as Wisconsin held its primary in the middle of a pandemic. Republicans who have insisted on keeping the election on schedule won 2 legal battles Monday as the state Supreme Court blocked Democratic Governor Tony Evers' bid to delay it until June, and the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the lower court's ruling that gave voters 6 extra days to return their ballots by mail. Every other state with an election scheduled for April postponed their contest or shifted it to by mail voting only. But Monday's court decisions mean Wisconsin, with 2,511 reported cases of coronavirus and 85 dead as of late Monday night, is pressing forward, though votes won't be counted until at least April 13th. It is positioned Wisconsin as the first battleground over voting rights in a year in which the question of how elections are conducted could be shaped by the coronavirus pandemic as Democrats seek funding for expanded vote-by-mail options across the nation, and Republicans express concerns about election security. All right. In addition to that, this just took place. This is from CNN. Gregory Craig and Ryan Nobles and Annie Grainer. Bernie Sanders drops out of the 2020 race, clearing Joe Biden's path to the Democratic nomination. Okay. Senator Bernie Sanders ended his presidential campaign on Wednesday, clearing Joe Biden's path to the Democratic nomination and a showdown with President Donald Trump in November. How do you think this is going to play out? What do you think? You can leave your comments if you like to. You think not Bernie, but Joe Biden's going to win, or do you think it's going to be another 4 years of President Donald Trump? It's amazing to me how people will put their stock in politics. If you see the pictures, they're pretty daunting. People out there with masks, a lot of old people. You saw people with wheelchairs. trying to vote. All right. Let me know what you think. This is from Reuters. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he's battling coronavirus, set for second night in intensive care. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was set to spend a second night in intensive care on Tuesday to help his fight against the coronavirus infection, as his designated deputy said he would pull through because he is a fighter. You know, when you think about this and the people that have been impacted, I personally know several people that have been impacted, some people that have died from this virus. It really makes me wonder about how much these politicians who will have these people stand out in line really care about their constituents. It doesn't seem like they do. It's all about political expedience. It's all about the acquisition of power. And on one hand of the extreme, you have people who are sounding the alarm to astronomical rates, and on the other hand, you have people that's saying that this coronavirus is not even real. But one thing is for certain, you're going to see the acquisition of power and the exploitation of people because of this tumultuous time. Things that were not like it was once said by Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste. It's definitely going to be used. You're going to see rights, civil and human rights violated throughout the first full week of Governor Pritzker's statewide stay-at-home order amid the coronavirus pandemic. From March 23rd through Sunday, the city saw a 23% single-week dip in its 7 major crime categories, including homicides, burglaries, and major thefts, compared with the same stretch in 2019, official city data shows. Now, I just read this article today. It's unfortunate. This is from Chicago Sun-Times. It's from today. It says 21 shot, 7 killed Tuesday in Chicago. Tuesday was the most violent day of 2020 so far, as temperatures reached summer-like levels for the first time this year. It was a beautiful day today. If you went outside, maybe on your porch in your backyard, it was a beautiful day. And I guess it's a beautiful day to kill some people in Chicago. 7 people were killed and 14 more were wounded Tuesday in shootings across Chicago, making it the most violent day of 2020 so far, as temperatures reached summer-like levels for the first time this year. A man was killed Tuesday evening in a shooting that left a 5-year-old girl and 2 other people wounded in Gresham. About 7:35 p.m., a group of people were sitting on the front porch of a home in the 8600 block of South Damon Avenue when someone in a black sedan fired shots, Chicago police said. Paul Boyd, a 37-year-old Hazelcrest man, was shot in the chest and pronounced dead at Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn. Police and the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office said. A 5-year-old girl who was shot in the foot was taken to the Little Company of Mary Hospital in good condition. A 24-year-old man shot in both arms was taken to the same hospital in good condition, while a 22-year-old man was shot in the leg was taken to Christ Medical Center in good condition. So much for, COVID keeping people in. It's really a travesty that we as a people kill each other at the rate that we do. It's very unfortunate, and we should consider this. If we have all these churches, if you go through our neighborhoods, not just in Chicago, but anywhere in which we reside, you will see an abundance. You will see a taught true righteousness. U.S. appeals court hands win to Trump plan to resume federal executions. U.S. legal news. This is from Reuters. The Trump administration's effort to resume federal executions got a boost on Tuesday from a U.S. appeals court, which tossed the district judge's injunction that blocked 4 death penalty sentences from being carried out. The 2-1 ruling by a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit could pave the way to the Justice Department carrying out the first execution of federal death row inmates since 2003, although other issues remain to be litigated. I want to read something Give me a second. I want to read something just about these federal executions and whether or not people should be executed. Let's go to, I just want to read this out of the Bible. Let's go to John the 8th chapter. John the 8th chapter. Just read something here. John the 8th chapter. I don't want to pick it up at verse 2 or verse 1. It says, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. So they catch this woman. They said they caught her in the very act of adultery. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? And that was the law, that the adulterer and adulteress would be killed. This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And before you know it, they left one by one. It says, and they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest. Doesn't deserve to die. The question is, who is righteous enough to hit the switch? Who's righteous enough to be the executioner? How does someone who is not righteous themselves execute this type of judgment? Here you see the hypocrisy of these people who brought the adulteress, but they caught her in the very act, which meant they knew the man too. Why didn't they bring him? That's unrighteous judgment. So that's why I don't agree with capital punishment. Not that people shouldn't die, but the question is, who is righteous enough to carry it out? And certainly people who are lawless, I'm talking about as far as moral law, if they're lawless in that regard, they shouldn't be carrying out capital punishment. African Americans seem to be dying of the coronavirus at outsized rates based on the few states providing data on the race of victims. This is Julian Kossoff, April 6th. It says, African Americans are dying from the novel coronavirus in disproportionate numbers, according to the limited data available on how the pandemic is affecting people of different races. Now, at one point, I heard repeatedly that Black people couldn't get coronavirus. I repeatedly heard that it was for white people only, or Chinese people. Only 3 states, Michigan, Illinois, and North Carolina, are providing data highlighting infection rates by race, but the figures indicate that African Americans have an outsized risk of getting a case of COVID-19 so severe that it leads to death. There are calls for more states to provide this kind of data so a more reliable picture can be formed across the U.S. In other words, they don't really know for sure, but it seems that way. But logic tells us that if it's exacerbated by the COVID-19 is exacerbated by pre-existing conditions like respiratory problems, like heart disease, like cancer, like diabetes, it is who leads in those categories? Who has the worst type of health care? 2 experts have suggested the virus is having a starker effect on African Americans because people in that demographic are more likely to live in poverty and to be in ill health, both of which can exacerbate COVID-19. Look at many of in our areas. You have food deserts. You don't have proper nutrition. New data from Michigan shows that African Americans are 14% of the population, but represent 40%, which is 247 of the coronavirus deaths in the state. Okay. Let's just read something here. I'm going to pick it up in the book of Deuteronomy. It's something we should consider, something that Moses wrote. He says, if the children of Israel did not keep the law, statutes, and commandments of God, he told them what would happen to them. And he says in verse 60, moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, which thou wast afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, then will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. We should consider that. It's not just COVID-19. You look at HIV rates, you look at cancer, you look at infant mortality, you look at hypertension, you look at heart disease. We're at the top of all those charts. Live update, U.S. reports highest single day of coronavirus death toll. The United States, and it also says stock market slides after early surge. The United States on Tuesday reported more than 1,700 coronavirus-related fatalities, a new one-day high, with some states still to release. Created to oversee his administration management of the $2 trillion stimulus package, a move that some will see as another instance of the president chafing at independent oversight. That's from the Washington Post, April 7th. What do you think? Do you think he's going to? What do you think about this $2 trillion stimulus package? It seems like another swindle for the corporations and the banks. And even though people are talking about these checks are not sufficient. I don't believe the economy is going to recover. This is my personal opinion. I don't believe that the economy is going to recover, that the American economy is going to recover like they think it is, or like they're claiming it will. I think things in a lot of aspects will never be the same. I think this is a waning empire. And prophetically, when you think about it, you can understand that. Again, there's a reason why you don't see in the last days America specifically mentioned. Just a thought. Let's see. This is China reported no new coronavirus deaths on Tuesday, the first time since it started publishing daily figures in January. The National Health Commission said it had 32 confirmed cases, down from 39 on Monday. It comes as the government is under scrutiny as to whether it is underreporting its figures. The government says more than 3,331 people have died and 81,740 have been confirmed as infected. All right, let's keep rolling. Right now, America has the highest rates. Netanyahu considers Paschal lamb sacrifice on Temple Mount for first time in 2,000 years. This is from Breaking Israel News. The Sanhedrin, that's that 70, tasked Shimshon El-Boim, head of the Temple Mount organizations, with submitting a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu to perform the ritual Korban Pesach, Passover sacrifice, in its proper place, the Temple Mount, and in its biblically mandated time, Wednesday afternoon, the eve of the Passover feast. God forbid we should allow the coronavirus to strike his children with rising up to bring about the solution given in the Torah for epidemics, the letter read. The request comes in the wake of the government rejecting requests to perform a reenactment of the Korban Pesach. The full dress reenactment has taken place for the past 9 years, drawing large crowds of the devoted, but this year the request to hold the event was denied due to the health ministry restrictions. The project is of the utmost importance for all of mankind, Rabbi Hillel Wise, spokesman for the Sanhedrin, told Breaking Israel News. He noted that the original Passover sacrifice offered in Egypt on the night before the Exodus was intended to stop the final plague, which was described as a disease, Yegef. That Nun Gimel Final Fay. It says, in addition, King David purchased the Temple Mount, built an altar, and offered a sacrifice to stop a plague. Well, it's not actually accurate as far as the Passover. It wasn't intended to stop the plague. Rather, it was to be protected from the plague. So he's, that's not accurate. I'm taking liberty there with what the Bible actually says. The ritual was what the scriptures say. The ritual will include burning the incense that is prepared for the exclusive use by the Kohanim. Those are the priests, so-called. their priest in the temple service. The incense is considered an essential element in ending epidemics. Okay. One thing, brothers and sisters, people need to take heed to is and pay close attention to is the building of a temple. I just want to read this in Matthew the 24th chapter. Matthew the 24th chapter. Keep your eye on what's going on. Matthew the 24th chapter. In the third verse, it says, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Okay. Now, one thing he says, take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Think about all those churches I said, churches like 40 going north, but not teaching what the book actually says. And he says something here. He says, ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars, all of which we're hearing about. He says, see that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Except for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. Just to think about this pestilence, I want to read something here. Also, Uganda, this is from Bloomberg, April 7, 2020. Uganda urges farmers to destroy the crops, given the supplies needed to fight the pest are diverted to curbing the COVID-19 outbreak. If you've not been paying attention, this is devastating Africa. Huge swarms of locusts the size of cities are attacking crops in countries in Africa. Countries from Uganda to Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia are battling the worst desert locust invasion in decades, a crisis exacerbated by the coronavirus emergency that has restricted air travel to slow transmission of the virus. New swarms also threaten Yemen, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Two swarms that, just to give you an idea of how large these are, two swarms that could cover as much as 10 square kilometers into Uganda from neighboring Kenya on Friday. The new entrants are mostly young locusts, which usually feed more than the adults that enter the country in February, he said. So these are the things you're saying. All these are the beginning of sorrows. He goes on to talk about, this is just an example. He talks about, and think about all the earthquakes that are taking place. A lot of these things that are happening, people aren't really paying attention to. Earthquakes are on the rise. You're seeing pestilence. He says something. He says, but when ye therefore, in verse 15, but when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. That's the temple. Okay, so that's something we need to keep our eye on. He said, Kohanim, they have all the priests, they have all the instruments, they have everything they need to reestablish temple worship. They just need political expedience. This is Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2:1. He says, now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Because he's telling you something has to happen first. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. A temple will be rebuilt, brothers and sisters, in due time. Last article I wanted to cover is pretty, it's unfortunate. This is from Foundation for Economic Education. April 6th, dairies are dumping millions of gallons of milk while stores are rationing. It's due to the coronavirus. What's going on? Frustrated shoppers have reason to cry for spoiled milk. Dairy farmers are dumping millions of gallons of the stuff. Meanwhile, some dairy products are sold out as many grocery stores across the country due to intense demand for basic household goods amid the coronavirus crisis. USA Today reports on one farm in Wisconsin. About 7 o'clock Tuesday night, Golden E Dairy got the call that any dairy farmer would dread. They were being asked to dump 25,000 gallons of fresh milk a day because there was no place for it to go, as the marketplace for dairy products had been gutted by the closure of restaurants, schools, hotels, and food service businesses. So those places that buy and purchase milk wholesale from these farmers, out of commission. So therefore, you think about how perishable milk is. It goes fast, and logistically, they cannot get milk to the places that it needs to go. So they had to dump milk. They had to switch everything from wholesale to private. It says an hour later, the family-run farm near West Bend, Wisconsin, opened the spigot and started flushing its milk into a wastewater lagoon, 220,000 pounds a day through next Monday. So that's what's happening right now. Just a waste of food, no place to go. What about empty dairy aisles? Aren't those better destinations than drainage pits? According to analysts, it is tricky to switch from dead markets to a surging one. Although this is, as Gizmodo explains, although consumer demand for milk in grocery stores is booming, it isn't easy for suppliers who normally make bulk products for restaurants to suddenly make the transition and make items for consumers. For example, it would cost millions of dollars simply to install the new equipment required to switch from making barrel cheese used in restaurants to making cheese wedges used by grocers. That's per Reuters. And the coronavirus crisis has made the shift especially challenging. As Yahoo Finance points out, mass closures of restaurants and schools have forced a sudden shift from those wholesale food service markets to retail grocery stores, creating logistical and packaging nightmares for plants processing milk, butter, and cheese. Trucking companies that haul dairy products are scrambling to get enough drivers as soon as some who fear the virus have stopped working. And sales to major dairy export markets have dried up as the food service sector largely shuts down globally. Another issue is that it is illegal to sell unpasteurized milk in many states, Wisconsin included. So if dairy processors aren't buying it from farmers, it goes to waste. And farmers have now narrow time windows to solve all these problems because milk is so perishable. It all adds up to a glut of milk at the dairy, even while there are shortages at the stores. It's like a perfect storm. The price is too darn low. The nasty little virus that is upending our lives bears much of the blame, but misguided policies are making a bad situation worse. Grocery stores could make up more of the slack if they were free to price and sell milk according to consumer demand. But laws against price gouging keep the retail prices of dairy products artificially low during a demand surge. Too low prices encourage hoarding, which leads to shortages. It also limits the profits for selling dairy. If a store were free to charge market prices, however high, it would discourage hoarding, prevent shortages, and earn higher profits. The higher profits would increase the grocer's own willingness to pay for dairy products. This increased demand would ultimately translate into higher prices for farm milk, making it more affordable for farmers to bring their milk to market. Since they can't charge market prices, stores instead prevent hoarding and shortages with purchase limits, which, among other bad effects like punishing large families, reduce dairy sales and make the milk glut even worse. Let's read a little bit more of this. It should also be noted that American dairy farmers have been frequently dumping milk long before the coronavirus. In 2016, the Wall Street Journal reported that more than 43 million gallons worth of milk were dumped in fields, manure lagoons, or animal feed, or have been lost on truck routes or discarded at plants in the first 8 months of 2016. That's according to the data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So it's a trying time in these times. And what should we do in these times? We need to really depend on Him, depend on the Most High, and pray and be strengthened in our faith, because dark times are approaching. This will, it really puts on my mind that we need to become as self-sufficient as possible. So if you can, you need to make moves. I would think we all need to make moves to become more self-sufficient, because as you can see, the politicians, they have really no answers. You see how volatile the system is that we are so dependent upon. And just one little change and everything is in disarray. So I think self-sufficiency is the way to go. That's what I personally think, but I like to know what you think. And that's all I have for you tonight. And I'll see you next time.